Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Serge, and I want to welcome each of you to another episode of Search for the Truth. And our goal with this is to, empower people with knowledge so they can take in charge of their health, so they can improve. Because I believe, and I see that every day, when you do the right thing to your body, to your mind, you can actually heal these different chronic conditions. Um, I'm not going to name anything, but it's possible to reverse those problems. And today I'm really excited to have Morgan with us. Thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Cool. So I'm excited because we're going to talk about something that can seem a little bit taboo to people. It's not something we talk a lot, but it's so important that we talk and help people with these different conditions, which is all related to the mind, the emotions, the trauma. I mean, I was blown away because years and years ago, I read some studies on psychology and different things like that. And they said that 70% of our health issues come from the mind, the head. So I was like blown away by that because I've been focusing on the body for all those years. And now I'm starting to see that, yes, the trauma, the past, the emotions, the mind can play a role, actually a major role in different health problems. So, first of all, can you tell us a bit about you and how you came about to be an expert and have so much knowledge on this topic?
Yeah, for sure. So, from a pretty young age, starting to enter adolescence, I found myself being depressed, struggling with anxiety, struggling with these mental health issues that, I mean, at the time, barely knew anything about. So, I had started pretty early with my experience of depression and anxiety, and out of necessity entered the world of personal growth. It wasn't until much later in my life, my mid 20s, that I really embraced it as my own career. But I've always been a student of um, spirituality, emotional health, psychology, all of those things, just because I was suffering and I needed help.
Yes.
So, pretty easy intro there.
Yeah. So you had to do something to help yourself.
Yes.
And this is something that a lot of people are dealing with, actually. They're a little bit afraid to talk about it. I was reading some stats since the beginning of last year, right? Since the beginning of the pandemic. There's a lot more young people like ourselves that are dealing with depression. The suicide rate has increased. A lot more people are feel lonely. So they are battling with depression and loneliness. And I've talked to some, actually, some of my friends are dealing with that, and they all feel that they don't bring any value, you know,
Mm.
to people's life, to their life, to society, to their work. So how can we fight this feeling and not being good enough?
Yeah. So, I think that it's really important to mention, because even though we think about these health issues on an individual level, like how can we change our individual actions to create a more healthy self? But like you're saying, the issue of loneliness, the issue of disconnection that's come up during this pandemic, the feeling that so many of us have at our core that we don't belong or we're somehow flawed, the way that our society is structured makes us think that we have to deal with these things by ourselves.
Yeah.
And it incentivizes us to not take on these giant, I would say, global health issues from a global connected perspective. I mean, humans evolved together, and yet in modern society, we're expected to be able to figure out things on our own and, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And if you're not doing this correctly, then that's on you. There's so many systems. I mean, I'm in the United States. I'm in California, um, and there's this false narrative of navigating things on your own. And that makes each of us feel like we have to deal with our loneliness. We have to deal with these collective emotional experiences like the trauma of the pandemic on our own. And that somehow, if we're not able to overcome what is our evolutionary prescription, like that we're not good enough. And we don't have the benefit of, in our increasingly individual, independent lives, of having this tribe of people that are telling us, hey, you have a role here. You have a mission. You have value to us. Your certain trade or expertise is keeping us going on this like smaller collective level. And it's such an unfortunate burden that we bear.
Yeah. It's unfortunate, and it's really, really heavy actually to carry in society, in our life. And that's why I believe a lot of people end up depressed and they end up terminating their life because they cannot deal with the pressure anymore. It's really
Yeah.
unfortunate. So, what do you do in those cases? I mean, I have met since the beginning of the pandemic young people, especially girls, I have said, especially women that seem to be more sensitive with this. So, how do you help them to, understand what's going on with them, with their life, and get out of that situation? Because it's not easy, but there's tools that we can use.
100%. So I think that the first thing that can really help someone sort of get on their own team within themselves is to have that first supportive relationship where someone understands you, listens to you, gives you space to kind of unfold what's been going on in your mind and your body. Because so many of us, like I said, in our regular environments, especially women, are caretakers. We're supposed to look out for what everyone else is doing, what's going on with everyone
Yes.
else, and
Yeah.
we absorb everyone else's emotions. And so we're dealing with our own, and then we have this giant layer of this like compassion that has nowhere to go, this empathy that has nowhere to go for, maybe you saw someone get hit by a bus and you feel the weight of that your whole day. And then that's a layer that you don't process. And then underneath that is the layer that you don't process of whatever your daily stressors are. So I think that starting into a therapeutic relationship or a coaching relationship, trusted friend, a mentor, someone where you have a space that's for you, not only helps you get started on a logistical level with, okay, well, what are we going to do? How, asking you these questions about how you're going to feel, but it signals to your subconscious that someone else cares about what's going on with you. You're not alone. You are worth that person's time. Because I see so many times people, and in myself, I also used to volunteer for the suicide crisis line. So I know a lot of the kind of themes that come up over and over. And depressed people, and maybe disproportionately women, tend to feel that we are a burden on other people, that we should just keep giving and giving and giving and never actually show what's going on beneath the surface with us, because, oh God, we don't want someone else to have to take care of us, even though there's this double standard that we're taking care of all the people around us. So having someone like a coach, a mentor, a therapist, whatever, who is listening to you and validating your worth simply by giving you their time and their attention, that signals to your subconscious like, okay, there's something besides just that voice in my head telling me that I'm not worthwhile and I should struggle with this alone.
Good point. And I want to piggyback on that because when I was younger, I didn't see the point of it. But now that I deal with people with chronic issues like Lyme disease and cancer, people are really sick. So those group sessions of people that have similar issues tend to work fairly good, actually, like the AA, for example. So you can connect with those people and you can share your struggles. And there's no taboo. Everything is open. You can just freely talk. I think it's important for those people, if there is in your city, to find group support like that.
Yeah. And I mean, for all the things that the pandemic has done that are negative, it has also opened up the world and destigmatized the world of connecting with other people online.
Yes.
Because maybe you can't find someone, depending on where you live, that is struggling with the exact same thing you are, like locally. But someone out there in the world is. And, you can find anyone struggling with anything in the world, like on Reddit, and really
Yeah.
connect with someone. Like, it doesn't have to be group therapy, although group therapy is amazing. There are smaller scale resources.
You have a good point. I mean, I have people reaching out to me from Australia, from Japan, from China. I mean, from all over the world. There's no limit when it comes to social media. That's
Yeah.
amazing. And I want your opinion on the other side of the scale. I would say is I hear people sometimes that you have to remove toxic
Mm.
people in your life. And I have personally witnessed that. So years ago, I dealt with depression and different issues, and it was actually a friend of mine. She was really toxic, and then I realized how bad she was until I decided to survey the link, and then she got out of my house, my life, and I started to see changes in my personality and my emotions. So
Mm.
how can you pinpoint how do you deal with this? Because it's not easy actually.
Right, 100%. And I think this actually really ties in nicely with what we were just saying about the fundamental feeling of unworthiness. When that's at our core, it's very hard to disconnect from someone who's toxic, because you have that fundamental fear that you may or may not be consciously recognizing that, if I cut this person out, am I going to have anybody? You are afraid to give up something that you understand, like the devil is always worse than the devil you don't know, is kind of the saying
Yes.
of,
Yeah.
like, even if something better could be on the other side, like if you get rid of this relationship that you're pouring time and energy in, um, you have space for something new and better to come in. But we so rarely want to take that leap into the unknown, because as humans, again, we're fighting that evolutionary system that is telling us, just stay with what's familiar, don't venture out, because what you can at least anticipate. What's familiar is comfortable, even if it's abuse. That, I mean, I think the most classic example is, of course, people that are victims of domestic violence and stay in situations where they're directly in physical danger. Emotionally, it's kind of the same thing. um, when we know what the behavior that we're going to receive is, even if it's abusive, there's a comfort to that, in a way. Um, but I think that I always like to think, I've been in a lot of like romantic relationships, and I always like to look at parallels between different spheres of our lives, different types of relationships, to see, like, okay, what patterns am I repeating that are showing up in these external things? So looking at evaluating the worth of any relationship in your life, I like to look at, almost imagine like a balance scale, and make a pros and cons list. What is staying in this person's life contributing to you? And what is staying in this person's life taking away from you? What are you losing? What are the drawbacks? And most often, we know that there's like one major drawback, which is they always make us feel shitty. you know
Yeah. No, you have a
but
good
we
point.
cling yes we cling to the we cling to the things that are, okay, good about the relationship,
Yeah.
because we're afraid to sever that tie, even though we
Yeah.
know it's making us sick.
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry, I
I
didn't mean to cut you off.
No, exactly, makes sense. And in regards to that, I think a lot of people don't make that move because they have internal obstacles, internal barriers, internal issues
Mhm.
that make them keep stuck in that situation. So, how can you recognize those patterns, and how can we prevent these to happen?
Yeah, I want to say that, number one, it's hard. It's hard to recognize them. Um, Usually, like, until something really bad happens, or maybe they walk out of our lives, and then we're left with kind of the wreckage of, oh, I let myself go really far down this road
Yeah,
before it happened. Um, Self care. I think self care is such a good thermometer for how something is affecting us. Are we no longer doing the things that we need to do to take care of ourselves? It could be we're not feeding ourselves properly, or, we're sort of expending energy that we need to use to take care of our basic needs,
Yeah.
entangled in these internal arguments with that person, or entangled in actual arguments with that person, where it's just continually robbing us of the energy that we need to do the basic stuff in our life, and we're talking ourselves out of you know making things better for ourselves. We're waiting for them to act, we're justifying their behavior. All these things are an energy suck for us. Or a coach that I follow calls it these power leaks. All these areas in your life where you're leaking power and you don't even recognize that you're giving it up sometimes.
Yeah. That's a good point. So how do you get at the root of these different emotions, the guilt, the fear, the anxiety, the anger, I mean, all those emotions, how do you go at the root cause and learn to work with these? Because from my experience, we cannot really anger is part of our life, guilt is part of our life. We cannot really avoid these emotions. How do you recognize them and acknowledge them and work with them?
Yeah, for some reason, the theme for me is just, why does society make it so difficult for us to do these things we need to do? Because
Yeah.
again, our society is so loud, such just constant chaos, and it fragments our attention in a way that makes it easy to just stay on Instagram and scroll forever, or surf the web forever.
Yes.
I think the most basic answer is get quiet, remove yourself from the noise, and whatever emotions you need to process for sure will bubble up. I mean, unconsciously, we consume TV for hours or consume the internet for hours. We consume X, Y, or Z because we're avoiding the opposite of that, which is
Yeah.
the space where those things can really arise and we can actually digest them instead of just layering stimuli on top of them.
I think it's a hard thing to do in a way that yesterday, right? We had that blackout. Facebook was out for hours. A lot of people freaked out. They didn't know what to do. And today I was reading my page. Like, man, people got all upset and emotional. We are so dependent on social media. And I have seen it myself. When I don't use it, I do feel calmer and I seem to spend more time with my family.
Yeah.
So I think that's a major step to do.
Yes, and it's funny because I actually had decided before the blackout, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go off social media for a little while, and then I couldn't even post that because it was gone.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like sucking me back in. But yeah, it's 100% a toxic relationship. Our relationship with social media, our relationship with our technologies, and it's engineered. We know this. It's
yeah,
engineered to be addictive
yeah,
and to hack our brain systems. And you can go down that rabbit hole forever. You can pull that slot machine lever forever.
yeah,
But bring it back to that balance of what am I putting in and what am I getting out, and being really honest with yourself about, okay, maybe 25% of the times I log on to Instagram, I connect with someone whose friendship I value, or I get feedback that is really motivates me, or I see something inspiring. 75% of the time I open Instagram, I scroll aimlessly and I feel emptier after I put it down, or I struggle to put it down, or I see someone else doing something that makes me upset at myself.
yeah.
That's not a good ratio.
I think that the problem with social media is today it's mostly, everything that I read on my, it's always negative. It's people are angry, they are mad at each other, they are
Right.
polarized. I think that's part of the whole thing that what they're trying to do. So I think it's a good idea that you had to try to minimize. Don't get me wrong. I like to go on Facebook, Instagram. I try to connect with people, with my patients, and I get something out of it. But I realize, at least, early on, that depending how you use it, right, it can be good or it can be really bad.
Right. And it's just part, to me, it's just part of that machine of society that keeps us from connecting deeply with ourselves, that keeps us from recognizing, oh, there's a sickness in me that I can't heal by just kind of layering noise on top of. I would say all like behavioral addictions,
Yeah.
substance addictions, it's all the same thing. It's layering something else on top of the issue. It's unprocessed trauma, et cetera, et cetera. But our society is just organized to incentivize us to be disconnected, lonely, sad, hurting, empty, because that's when we'll buy things. I'm such a anti-capitalist, but it's it's really heartbreaking. It's really heartbreaking, and I also know the ways that it's really difficult to do the things we know are going to be healthier for us. So that's where I come back to, okay, the root issue. Let's get to the root issue and not get lost in a rabbit hole of um, solutions that are actually more noise.
Yeah. Yeah. I see what you mean. And in my field, I see a lot of again, it's mostly women dealing with emotional trauma, or they are
Yeah.
actually more open to talk about that. But
Yeah.
one of the things I deal a lot with is young teenagers with weight problems, right? They come in, they want to lose weight. And I think it comes back to how a woman has been perceived in magazines, in social media, and TV, and so on. So how do you have those poor little teenagers, dealing with falsehood and things that's just not realistic at all?
Yeah, falsehood. I love the way that you put that. Um, and that kind of leads me to my answer is like point them back to, or get them to ask of themselves, what is their truth? Beyond all these layers of what other people are doing or how you look, or the feelings of not good enough, or the things you think you should be doing, or what your parents are telling you, blah, 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 blah. What
Yeah.
do you know about yourself at your core? What lights you up? And rebuilding that sense of a connection with yourself at the ground level of like, if none of that other stuff existed, if Instagram didn't exist, if your parents weren't telling you this or that or whatever, if that noise was not there, if you didn't have to make money to survive, whatever, what lights you up? And build from there and reconnect to that authentic connection that you have with the things that you enjoy.
Wow, this is really deep. This is amazing, actually, because from my experience, a lot of those teenagers don't even know themselves. They have those false opinions from the parents. The parents want them to play this, do this, and they are pressured to do things they are not willing to do at all. And when
Yeah.
you take the time to listen to them, you will see that the parents most of the time are totally wrong about the kids.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And the more time that you spend living in that mask that you're trying to create for everybody else, the farther you get from who are you at your core, and what
Yeah,
do you want to be your internal compass pointing you there. And it happened, like, people at every age are struggling with this.
yeah.
But I do think that I really feel for teenagers that are just struggling with more noise and information than has ever existed.
Yeah.
Like, I can't I can't imagine like that. The cards are really stacked against their brains in that way.
I mean, yeah, they are bombarded from different, all different angles. And some of it is not just the teenager. I believe some of it is the parent as well. I think they need to be more aware of the kids' needs. I know it happened to me last year with my daughter. She's a teenager, 13 years old. And I wanted so
Yeah.
badly for her to do some art. But I realized that she didn't like to do art. She is actually a poem writer. She likes to
Mm.
read and write poems. And since we've been focusing on that, she's better and she enjoyed doing what she wants to do. That was a big lesson for me as a dad. I think the parents need to learn what makes the kids happy.
Yeah, and I see parents that are so kind of blinded by their anxieties about their kids. And it's,
Yes.
again, for them, that's part of the noise. That's part of falling into the trap of trying to control something that isn't within you. And if you just sat with your kid and listened to them as a person rather than kind of filtering them through this lens of what do you think they should do, because at your core, you're afraid that they're not going to stack up to X, Y, or Z, or they're going to repeat the mistakes you made, or da, 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 da,
Yeah.
da, da. It's so easy to get lost in your fear script and not be present with that other person.
It is really good point. So we talk about social media, right? To stay away from it as much as possible. What are the other tools that people could use to help with their traumas, their emotions, dealing with themselves, learning about themselves? So what do you use that really work with people?
Yeah. It's it's funny because I there's so many answers out there.
Yes.
You could Google for a million years about
Yes.
tools and tips and tricks and this and that and da da da. Um, but I think a lot of people want an answer that isn't the simple one that's difficult, which is be with yourself. Get clarity about what's going on in you from a non-judgmental state of mind. Writing, journaling, fabulous. Meditating, you can avoid meditating forever, for years, and tell yourself, I can't sit still, I can't do this or that, what else can I do?
Yeah.
But everything that you're going to do that's going to make you better at coping with stress, at just being with yourself, being more present, is ultimately going to be one form or another of driving you towards having a more mindful outlook. And meditation is simply the best way to do that, is just to not attach to your thoughts. But you can, of course, have meditative, mindful experiences going on a walk, going to yoga,
Yeah.
whatever. The important skill to cultivate is being aware, being the objective observer of what you're experiencing rather than identifying with what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
And just recognizing that, oh, okay, I'm having this thought right now about X. If I'm recognizing that I'm having this thought about X, I am not X. I am not the thought about X.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even the thinker of that thought. It's, it's like, whoa, but
It sounds so simple, but when I started learning that, it's not as easy to implement. It does get much easier over time, but like every new skill, you have to be mindful of and aware about that.
yeah. And you have to celebrate when you have those little moments. Like, I think that we can easily have those moments and then immediately follow that up with, oh, I didn't do it right. I wasn't paying attention. I should have been like this centered monk that never has a thought. And that's not a great way to be with yourself either, because that's still the wrong how of it. The
Yeah.
how of it is developing that gentle, unconditionally loving lens. Because ultimately, like, most of us are so hungry for that. We're so hungry for that, like what I would call a divine feminine space, to just a place where we can be not judged, received, felt, and comforted.
Yeah.
Um, and the more that we avoid giving ourselves that, the farther away from it we are. Um, Again, way easier said than done, but it's that continual practice.
Like I said, everything in life takes practice and time. People, I believe, needs to be patient. There's no quick fix, especially when it comes to the mind. It's a journey. It's a long journey, but it pays off over time.
Yeah, and the positive or kind of like quick fix element is that you can always start. Like,
Yeah.
every moment is a
Yeah.
moment where you can choose to act differently, or shift the container you're putting yourself in, or whatever language you want to use. Um, and there's a Buddhist concept that Tara Brach talks about called the second arrow, which is we can't control the first thought that we have. We might have some judgmental thought, but we can control the next thought about it. So many times we have like a first thought that's like, I feel crappy about this. And then the second thought or the second arrow is, I feel crappy about the fact that I feel crappy.
Yeah.
And that's where we can control it. That's where we can say, I feel that you're hurting because of this thought, instead of adding the damage or replicating the damage that first thought or that first arrow is doing, making that choice to pivot. But in order to do that, you have to, at your core, believe that you're worthy of doing that. And that's where, sometimes support of other people can really be helpful. It's a long journey, as you said. It takes a lot of time, but it's also necessary, that this work is going to be waiting for you however long you put it off.
Exactly. You can believe you can deal with this for some time, but it's gonna hunt you back.
Yep.
Down the road, you have to deal with your mind and your thoughts and your emotions and your lifestyle, your patterns.
Yeah.
So, as a final word, what would you say as a piece of advice to bring some hope to people dealing with hopelessness or the feeling of not being worthy? I mean, all those negative emotions.
Yeah, I think if you're in that place, know that you're not alone. I've been there too. I'm an expert in this stuff. And, I had just recently a period of a week or so of totally hopeless depression. And even though in those moments it feels totally unending and totally real, it is, it's your feeling. It will still pass, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah.
It's the weather. It's like the weather. So if you're feeling like you have no access to hope whatsoever, take care of yourself. Go back to the most basic thing of how do you care for like an infant,
Mhm.
Are they fed? Are they tired? Have you had
Basic,
water?
basic, but it can make a big difference, actually.
It really can. And
Yeah.
and not to give yourself the pressure of like, I have to solve this right now or else I'm here
Yeah.
forever. Because that's just so oppressive.
Yeah. So, how can people reach out to you for some
Yeah,
help, some advice, some questions?
absolutely. Ordinarily, I would say I would give my social media handle. But yeah, like I said, I'm trying to distance myself a little bit from that. So the best place to get in touch with me really is my website, which is morganbeard.coach. Um, My email is also yes, opposite of no, at morganbeard.coach. So please reach out with anything. If anything I said resonated with you and you have no other comment, great. I would love to hear that. Or if you do have additional questions, or want support in your life in the ways that I've been sharing, I would absolutely love to hear from you.
Like Morgan said, you're not by yourself. Reach out for some help, people like her who knows how to help you. So thank you for your time. That was a really nice discussion, really
Yeah.
important, actually. I think you brought some value to our lives. So thank you for that. You will have to be back. There's so much more we can talk about, actually. So thank you again and have a good rest of the day and God bless you.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. It was really a treat.
Thank you.